So tonight, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the tradition and the perspective of the form of Buddhism that we're practicing. Give a little context to what we're doing here on the retreat, maybe a bigger picture, and it might help clarify what we're doing here in the meditation practice. So I want to begin with a Pali word. And Pali is the language very close to what the Buddha spoke. It was the language that his teachings were written down in. So there's a Pali word, avijja, A-V-I-J-J-A. And the A negates this, the word vijja, so avijja. And it gets translated as misunderstanding or ignorance. Ignorance is a little more of a condemning translation, but misunderstanding is a little more benign. Both words are appropriate, and we'll get into that. So what are we misunderstanding? And the root of this is why we get frustrated in life and why our hearts get broken and why we can never quite align with life in a way where we can find durable peace. Our eyes are open, our hearts are trying to be open, but what are we not seeing that keeps setting us up for suffering? And it comes down to this word avijja. We're not quite seeing correctly. And what we're doing in meditation is improving and stabilizing our intimacy with life so that we can see clearly. And that's all of our meditation practice is to do nothing more than stabilize intimacy so we can see clearly. And we can see more clearly than a conventional mind can see. Our conventional minds, they often don't know that they're confused. They often think they're seeing clearly. But our conventional minds are agitated by our daily lives. And also by societal views that we don't know to question. I'd like to start with a zig and I'll zag back. How many of you have ever seen the sun moving through a clear sky? How many of you ever watched the sun set over a horizon? Now, how many of you know that it's the earth that's turning, but we experience it as the sun moving? For how many of you is that new information? And how many of you want to debate that point? Okay, no flat earthers brave enough to stand out, but they're still holding on. Which is an amazing thing about avijja, is that it has staying power. It fights back. Flat eartherism is not declining. Flat eartherism is actually it's trying to send rockets up into space to take a picture of the flat earth. I mean, I try to be open-minded, and all opinions are relative, but it's amazing that you actually can't have a working cell phone in the way the satellites orbit the Earth. If the Earth is actually a flat pancake surrounded by ice walls, which is Antarctica, keeping it all the water in. So subjectively, we experience the sun moving. And you can be very intimate with life and still get the subjective feedback that it's the sun that's moving. So intimacy is not quite enough. But what happened in the 1600s, and you'll get to see the science nerd in me, wearing my cape and big N on the chest, is that there was a Danish astronomer who took such precise measurements that no models that kept the Earth at the center could actually fit the data. So the data began to crack the belief that the Earth is at the center. You have heightened sensitivity, really careful measurement, and the underlying subjective view that we are a big thing at the center and everything rotates around us. If you watch the stars, they have this weird type of orbit around us that changes year by year. Over the year. So it's intimacy plus insight that changes into correct view. And with that, a lot of things drop into place and make sense that could not have made sense if you kept the original view. But the original view seems so common sense that you don't even know you have a view that you're interpreting things through. So that was one scientific revolution. And what happened is somebody built a telescope, but it was Galileo who first pointed it at heavenly objects. And he saw textures on the moon, which defied a belief that heavenly objects had to be perfectly round. He saw the first moons of Jupiter, orbiting Jupiter, phases of Venus. And with that heightened intimacy, he was the first person that had direct cognizant contact with the real texture of what was happening up in the sky. And from that point forward, the truth just kept growing in the relationship to how our solar system is organized became more and more apparent. There were still tenacious views that the planets had to move in perfect circles. There was a belief, again, that heavenly objects had to be perfectly round, but they actually move in ellipses. And so reality doesn't conform to our simple needs. And it's not always obvious to our common sense how things work. But when you get the right perspective, a lot of things that have been confusing and baffling land. And then you can do things like take pictures of black holes in other galaxies and actually see the ring of gas going near the speed of light. Anybody see that picture? Anybody blown away by that picture? So here's another mind blow from science. How many of you have ever been to a place that has a really high tide, like New Brunswick, or where it's just fantastic how much water goes up and down? And we use common language like the tide is coming in, the tide is going out. And you can have generations of people living by the ocean, and that's the subjective experience. The water goes out far away from you, the water comes in. What happens is that the water is actually stationary as a bulge under the moon, and the earth turns. So the water actually is not coming and going. We're rotating under the bulge of water, and that's what causes it to flood our harbors and empty out. So again, intimacy alone doesn't automatically reveal the truth, because you might still have an unexamined idea from subjective experience. And then increased intimacy just keeps reaffirming the subjective experience. So you need an insight. And what the Buddha, the reason I've enjoyed this form of spirituality is that being a scientist when I was first getting into Buddhism, I wasn't asked to believe anything that I could never test for myself. I was saying, if you do these experiments, you'll probably discover these phenomena, and come see for yourself. And that's another phrase, ehipassiko, from the Pali language. It all should be discovered for yourself. But you have to increase and stabilize your intimacy in order to see more clearly than we can in conventional living. And that's what meditation is for, and that's what submersive retreats are for, is to give us a chance to heighten intimacy with our own minds, our own bodies, the world around us. And from that intimacy, you can then ask questions and see if the conclusions map up to what the Buddha pointed towards. Now, unlike the tides and the sun moving, that doesn't cause our suffering. So those insights are phenomenal. But what the Buddha was interested in is, what are we misperceiving that actually gets us tangled up in suffering? So that's what we're going to talk about over the next several days. But it takes a day like today to kind of begin the transition out of our doing mind, which leaves us agitated, into a mind that's heading towards settling, that's heading towards heightened and stabilized intimacy. So there are several things that we're misperceiving that our conventional mind, most of the way the mind is structured. So here's a silly analogy. It used to be you'd buy a computer and they'd give you really crappy software, which would frustrate you enough that you'd want to buy good software. And now they just give you the good software right off the bat. So we are born with instinctive behavior, and we have a capacity to learn and to model the world. But you have to work at it. And if you don't work at building these structures in your mind, in your brain, you can't acquire that higher software. So one thing our conventional mind does, and it gets away with it, even though it causes a lot of friction, is we assume that there are nouns. We assume that things have stable existence. So much so that we actually start to treat them like they are consistently permanent. And we get away with that even though the entire world is showing us that it's not made of anything permanent and consistent. What there are slow verbs and repetitive verbs. And a slow verb is so slow it looks like a noun. So here is a verb happening in front of you. All my cells are templing, and they all have the same blueprint inside their core. And there are a trillion, maybe 10 trillion cells templing right now. But our minds will say, oh, you were the guy here this morning, and maybe I met you last year. But there is no noun here you've actually ever met. This is a fluid, dynamic process. And I've been in him my whole life, trying to get him to be more consistent, get him to behave like the noun I always wish he was. And he keeps verbing out of control. I have barely some influence over how much verb is happening here. And that frustrates us. We actually are looking for more stability, but we're in a liquid, dynamic universe that doesn't have stability in it. But it offers enough stability that we can actually badly model the universe as made up of stable things. So this bell, this chair, this body, this yurt, all your bodies, they present stable enough that you say, this exists. And what we don't see is that everything is in a process of being made or arising. It presents with a period of stability, and then it begins a decay process. And there's nothing you can contact through your senses that isn't in that arc. But for simplicity's sake, we reduce things to their stable presentation. And then we get frustrated every single time that they reveal their actual nature, which is everything is on an arc of arising, existing, and then passing. I really like this shirt. Yeah, I have a fascination with blue. So I bought a second shirt just like it, which is my new strategy on shirts. Don't keep hunting for good shirts. If you like a shirt, buy two because you'll want it. So that's the way I'm trying to strategize verbs. Buy two verbs and it will appear like more of a noun. But I watched the other version of this shirt and I don't know how it happened, but the button tangled and snapped off. And so right away I went, it's a new shirt. First time I washed it, it already popped a button. It means I have to sew it, and I haven't sewn buttons in a long time. And this whole sort of frustration came up. The frustration came because I was trying to make a noun out of a thing that would be in transition. And it doesn't transition to get newer. It doesn't transition to get redder unless I wash it with something very red. The buttons are going to fall off. Why am I disappointed? Because it's very hard to live in accordance with this truth, even though the universe is constantly showing you its true nature. So this is where we have misunderstanding, but we're not actually passive in that. We prefer the illusion of stability. And we get away with it and it's comforting, and then we're terrified when that misunderstanding, reality is going to do what it's going to do, and we're the ones that get thrown because we live in a dream. We get away with it, we double down on that illusion, and then the illusion breaks. Reality goes this way, and we just cannot hold on to our view, and then we stress around that. I've known my parents would age since I was young, but their actual aging is really painful. So I've been trying not to suffer my whole life. And I didn't know where I was clinging, but unconsciously, they were always there. They were always within phone reach. They were always there at holidays. They were always 30 years older than me and kind of wiser, except in some areas. But now there's an age happening, and it's so completely natural, but it's still shocking. Now, why is it shocking? I've done nothing but try to align myself with this. It's because I'm not living on retreat. I'm not living with heightened sensitivity where I am having a true relationship with reality. I go into conventional living. I try not to buy into it, but unconsciously I do buy into it. And then I suffer. But what I know to do is not to contract against that. All my suffering shows me where I have wrong view and what views I have to adjust. And I already know what I have to adjust. So I suffer a lot less. Got a new phone, new iPhone, got its first scratch. It's a completely lawful event, and it's still frustrating. So I bought an electric car, and my old car had a lot of sun damage in California. So everything is new on it. And I was like, I don't want to cling, but I do want to preserve the newness. And I already scratched it. But that first scratch is so lawful. It's so completely lawful. And I saw myself, don't do it, don't cling. There's going to be a first scratch. Let there be a first scratch. I was like, but it's so new. Look at this. It's so new. One time I parked it, got out of the car, and I walked by a car that had one of those like claw scratches across the side, or somebody had gone by a cement wall or something. I had this terror come over me. Like, I'm not at all emotionally prepared for that to happen. I was like, look at that. You just bought it, and already there's this terror streaking you. It's like, how do you park a car where it can never be scratched? And like, this is like, I want to put fenders around it. And all that is this enjoyment but also this hope that it won't be affected by its underlying reality. That's my avijja. And I saw myself doing it, and I saw myself liking it. I was like, there you go. You are setting yourself up for the first scratch. And you're actively doing it. Like, I talk to myself in the third person sometimes, like, please, Temple, please, you know how much we're going to suffer. You know what's coming. Align now. Like, yeah, I don't care. Like, no, that's not it. That's just a lie. You care. But relax the caring and have a real relationship to what this car is, the transient object. Every gray hair that's coming to my beard and my eyelashes is foreshadowing. It's giving me a lot of forewarning that this animal is not meant to live forever. So I'm being let down slowly into the reality of a transient body. And there's a shake in there. There's an instinctive shake in there. I already know that this heart, even though it has these patterns, it actually can wake up. And it can wake up partially, which means you suffer less. And it can wake up radically, which means you radically suffer less. And by the tradition, it can wake up fully, which means that all the suffering can be unpatterned from your heart. That might be a high bar for a 6-day retreat, but don't underestimate yourself. So that's what we're heading for, and what we're trying to do in meditation practice is slowly stop reinforcing the way our minds work habitually. So what you experienced today was a lot of habitual patterns of daily mind. And it doesn't easily take to being present. As you would see on a first day retreat, you sit down to be still, and all the hamsters on all the squeaky wheels are running just as they do in daily life, but you'd be following all those impulses and reinforcing those patterns. And you come to a quiet place. You're minding your own business, just trying to be still. And what you're feeling in your body is a lot of the imprints of the stress of daily life. So the body is uncomfortable. The mind has a lot of habits that are hard to slow down. But what you'll see over the days here is not quite like an escalator going up in a smooth trajectory. But over the days here, your body will let go of imprinted patterns of stress and tension. And that increased circulation. Your mind will let go of some hardened patterns and beliefs. And what you'll end up with more is a liquid mind and a liquid body, which it already is. It doesn't liquefy by being on retreat. It's already liquid, but you actually can conform to your true liquidity. And in that, there's a lot less stress. So if you have a block of ice, the same amount of water that's liquid, you can stress and crack the ice. You can't stress and crack the water. You can stab it with a knife and it splashes. You stab the ice, you're picking off the surface, you're cracking it, you're chipping it. Hit with a hammer, it smashes into pieces. Hit the water, it splashes. As soon as you stop agitating it, the water goes back into sort of a whole union where the ice bears all the patterns of stress that you put it through. We want to have a mind that's in its liquid form, a heart that's in its liquid form. But it means going from a land-oriented being where things appear solid to being a sea-faring being or a river-dwelling being. The thing is, we're already in the river. What we're doing is we're waking up to the fact that we're already in the river, and you will be less stressed in your liquid being because you're in how the universe is actually working. So that's the transition we're making. And every time you bring your mind back from a habit of mind and you rest in the body, you're improving intimacy, non-distraction, not believing in all the paintings that your mind creates and all the movies that it plays for you that in everyday life seem very real. But on retreat, we can begin to see that the mind can paint all sorts of pictures. But there's a turning point where it's just mental activity. One of the only insights I remember from my first 10-day retreat was about day 4. At the time, I was 21. I was having a power struggle with my parents about my future, and I went all the way to the West Coast. I grew up in Providence. I went to school in Portland, and I was trying to get psychic distance from them, and I needed that. I thought I needed real distance to get distance in my mind. But I brought them with me, and all the freedom I was looking for in Portland, I would feel them, and I'd argue with them in my mind, and I'd go back, and I'd be so frustrated with them. I'd go back for Thanksgiving. It's like, you've been in my head the last 3 months, limiting my freedom and condemning my choice, and like, what did I do? What did I do? I was so happy you went off to college, but they'd imprinted. So in the middle of the retreat, my mind was wandering. It was the first time I actually saw that the wandering content was a picture my mind had created versus it was actually reality. So I was having an argument with my mom in my head, and the teachers talking to the students said, the thought of your parents is not your parents. And he could have slapped me across the face and it would have been gentler. And it started this reverberation. And I was like, the thought of my parents is not my parents. The thought of my parents is not my actual parent. So I win an argument in my mind. I've not actually won an argument with my actual parents. That was phenomenal. That was so liberating. And I was like, wow, I don't have to win all of these arguments in my mind. I have to pop them like soap bubbles. And they're a lot easier to pop like soap bubbles than to step into the bubble, be defined by the terms that the mind created, and then fight it out. And you win, but you haven't really won anything. You have to do the same fight the next day. So that's getting some perspective. The thoughts in your mind are not actual realities. They're real events, but they're thought. Every time your mind wanders, it has not actually traveled to a real place and had a real experience. That is the creativity of the mind. So, this is some of where we're headed. And what I want to talk about is the path towards there. And it comes down to the teaching the Buddha gave on mindfulness and breathing. This might not occur to you that this is the key that actually goes into the lock and turns it and pops the pattern of suffering, that your breath is actually that key. We have a lot of keys, we have a lot of strategies, and we're trying them all. But it might not have occurred to you that this is the key that fits the lock, and you turn it and it pops open. Mindfulness of breathing is the key that fits the lock of suffering and pops it open. The Buddha gave many teachings on mindfulness and breathing, and he gave it in a graduated form depending on what students had practiced. So the first thing he would teach is just when you're breathing in, know you're breathing in, and when you're breathing out, know you're breathing out. And you let somebody have weeks and months and let them practice that until that becomes something like, yeah, I know when I'm breathing in, I know when I'm breathing out. And just doing that, you're not reinforcing all the thoughts in your mind. You begin to have real-time experiences with perspective. I know when I'm breathing in, I know when I'm breathing out. One time he was walking by a group of monks who were practicing. They must have been fairly new to meditation, because he walked up to them and say, How are you today? What are you practicing? I said, mindfulness of breathing. They said, oh, good. How do you practice that? And they were all silent. It was the Buddha. They were new. And no one spoke up. And finally, a plucky one, a courageous one said nervously, when I breathe in, I know I'm breathing in. When I breathe out, I know I'm breathing out. That's how I practice mindfulness of breathing. And the Buddha said, good. That is what I say as well. That is the practice of mindfulness of breathing. But you can actually take it the next step further. And he gave them a list of 16 classical steps that they can then practice to develop mindfulness of breathing. And that covered them for the next year, just to work on these 16 steps. So mindfulness of breathing can just be know you're breathing in, know you're breathing out. It doesn't have to get more complicated than that. But there is a process that is happening while you do that, and you can make that more explicit. And it's possible that seeing these steps, you can encourage them. But it works so well that all you have to do is actually just know you're breathing in when you breathe in, and know you're breathing out when you breathe out. Sometimes it's actually good to keep it that simple. So keeping it that simple is this side. This is a teaching. Just know you're breathing in when you're breathing in. It's like, I got it. Look at this page. I have understood all the complexity that's on this page. So sometimes this is actually the more useful side of the page. But what is on this side is the most technical description that the Buddha offered in all of his teachings on how to step by step encourage the ripening of mindfulness of breathing. So these are called the 16 steps of mindfulness of breathing, 16 steps of the Anapanasati practice. There are 16 steps. They're broken into groups of 4. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, and then we're going to just focus on steps 1 through 8 because that's the bread and butter of your practice. Even after 30 years of practice, I can report myself and most teachers are still laying the foundation of these first 8 steps. So that these are not things to get beyond to some greater goal. I call it Space Needle practice. We have a very narrow base and a really fat top, and everybody wants to take the elevator up to the top, and there's no destination up there that's worth it until you get to the top. There's so much well-being that comes in these first 8 steps that they are worth pyramid form. It's worth having a whole base, and there's so much of our aggravation that gets alleviated by these first 8 steps. And then there's development beyond that. We'll talk about what's called the 3rd tetrad and the 4th tetrad a little bit later. So beyond knowing you're breathing in when you breathe in, beyond knowing you breathe out when you breathe out, the next step is in this first tetrad. Tetrad means, I guess, a grouping of 4. So it says, well, breathing in, I know I breathe in. While breathing in a long breath, I know I breathe in a long breath. While breathing out a long breath, I know I breathe out a long breath and a short breath. And to put it simply, what that means is you're not just knowing in and out, which is one level of intimacy, but you're actually starting to know the quality of the breath while it's happening. So there are times that I sit down and I was like, oh, look, my body quite naturally is taking long breaths. Then another part of the day, I know I'm breathing in, I know I'm breathing out, and I check in a little deeper. It's like, oh, I'm only breathing into the top of my chest. I invite my body to take a deeper breath that it doesn't want to. And I've learned to respect my animals. I don't make it breathe deeper. But your breath is not the exact same breath through the day. And these first 2 steps are invite you not to get into a hypnagogic state of I'm halfway mindful, halfway checked out, because all breaths are basically the same. And so I've gotten into this fuzzy, detached, relaxed state. One time when I was 21, I had this beautiful opportunity to hike in the Himalaya and Nepal. And I was just flooded with the beauty. I'd just done my first 9-day retreat, so my senses were wide open. This guy that I was hiking with, we hiked up and he said, I wish you'd just take a helicopter down. I said, oh my God, why would you do that? And he was like, we've already seen the trail, so I can get on to other things quicker. I was like, oh, you haven't. It's like you haven't even begun to know anything up here. And if you know anything, it just reveals more beauty and complexity. So there was this consumption mind. But it's one place that you'll find that you get sleepy in terms of breathing meditation. Is that, yes, I'm breathing in, yes, I'm breathing out. I don't really have to be that much more intimate. It doesn't give me that much more. So I'm actually going to be a little sleepy, relaxed, and just basically know that I'm breathing with half my attention. And from there, your mind wanders easily. Now, you can't be hypervigilant and measure each breath and try to qualify it. It's like this one is a little longer, a little deeper, a little quicker. That's too much hyperanalysis. So what these first 2 steps invite you to do is, as much as possible, receive each breath like you receive a meal. Like you don't know what's coming. Don't pre-assume you know what the breath is going to be like. It will be in the category similar to other breaths, but see if you can have some freshness in relationship to the breath. And all through the day, what will happen is you'll have one level of intimacy, and the breath will get very familiar, and you'll think there's not much more you can get out of being intimate with the breath. But if you stay with it, which you're kind of forced to do on a long retreat, there's nothing else to do, mindfulness actually builds, and then it goes deeper or higher, whatever your analogy is, and the breath suddenly has more flavor and texture to it. You can feel deeper into your torso while it's happening. It's like, oh my God, I can actually feel my ribs separating. That has always been happening, but now I can do that. And then I don't know, you can't do it. And you think, oh, I've backslidden. It's like, no, it's not quite an escalator up. Please don't expect that. Over your time here, the breath keeps getting more interesting. And I've been doing mindfulness of breathing for 30 years, and it's both a soothing sanctuary. I go to restore myself, and it's ever increasingly intimate connection to life, to breathe. And so it hasn't actually plateaued. It keeps going deeper. There's a time that the Buddha, who taught for about 45 years, maybe 40 years, somewhere between 40, 45 years, all the monastics in the area had come to this one monastery to practice together for 3 months, and they had the benefit of the Buddha being there. At the beginning of the retreat, he said, I'm going to go practice 3 months of my own seclusion. So when I read that, I was like, oh, that's amazing. He had all those people he could teach, and yet he chose to actually do his own silent practice. The beautiful thing is that role models that hearing the Buddha speak is great, but what is actually more important is putting his teachings into practice. That he himself was not beyond practice, that mindfulness of breathing was what he needed to do to refresh and restore himself so that he could go on teaching, and that was worthy of doing. So he took the 3-month retreat not to teach and not to be an amazing Buddha in terms of a teaching, actively, verbally teaching, but to role model that mindfulness of breathing was not a secondary activity that he was beyond, but even he did it. And he said, not only do I do it, mindfulness of breathing is the meditation that all Buddhas of all time do. And he did these 16 steps. So after the retreat, when they say, what does your teacher do? Does mindfulness of breathing? Or does he do a very exotic form of it? And he said, no. I want you to say that I do these 16 steps. The first thing I do is I know I breathe in when I know I breathe in. I know I breathe out when I breathe out. I know a long breath from a short breath. So he goes through these 16 steps, and that's what he said. I'm not doing something exotic. I'm doing the same practice, but it keeps getting more intimate. There's no upper limit. So hopefully that's encouraging. You're doing what the Buddha does when he practices. So beyond knowing the breath, one thing you'll see in all of these instructions is that in the actual discourse it says, when I breathe in, I notice this. When I breathe out, I notice that. So the breath, even though we're going on to other things to observe, you actually know it in consort with breathing. So breathing becomes the venue that you begin to build intimacy with other parts of yourself. So the first two are directly about the breath. Steps 3 and 4, experiencing the whole body. So you're breathing, which means you're aware of your upper torso. And at times you can expand your awareness into the entire body and see what sensations are available. Now you don't put the breath aside because your breath is inside the body, but you let your awareness include other body sensations. And you're already tracking body sensations when you're tracking the breath. So you're just expanding to other things like the breath in the body, pulsing, stretching, feeling bone from soft tissue, feeling movement happen, cool air coming in, going in, warm air coming out. All those are body sensations, and the rest of your body is full of those sensations as well. There are many ways to practice this step 3. There's a teacher named Goenka. He teaches a very careful body scan where you take a thumbnail worth of skin and you go around and you experience the surface of your body in a very prescribed way, and you see what your body is doing, and that way you experience the whole body. Another teacher that I worked with said, you don't have to do it in a prescribed way, just go where it's obvious and then invite yourself to a slightly less obvious place right next to it. So I feel heat in my armpits. Where does the obvious heat end and where is there subtle heat? I thought, oh, that actually invites me to be a little more curious, a little more quiet. I go from distinct heat to less distinct heat. Can I actually find the edge? Like, oh, there is no edge. It just gets more and more subtle. I thought, okay, this is cool here. This is warm here. Can I actually begin to go between what's obvious? And I really love that practice. The more defined way of knowing my body got a little bit formulaic, but this discovery of the body through what's obvious and then what's subtle. Feeling your heartbeat where it's obvious, your pulse points where it's obvious. But can you feel subtle places where your heart is beating? And then let yourself to feel even more subtle places. Over the days that you're here, that will actually happen automatically. Let's just give a few ideas of how you might explore your body while breathing, experiencing your whole body. Step 4 says, once you've experienced your whole body, try calming your bodily activities. And the word there is actually this word sankhara. And sankhara is a repeated habit. So many of you might have felt neck tension today in your shoulders because we live with our shoulders up, because we're psychologically facing a lot of deadlines and pressures, and the way we go through that is to protect our neck. Our body doesn't know that what our mind is thinking isn't real. It's like a very attentive dog. It looks to us, are you afraid? I'm afraid. You're calm? I'm calm. The body says, oh, my brain's freaking out. There must be something dangerous. Let's protect our neck. But it doesn't know that these are paintings in your mind. So our shoulders are up. And what will happen over the days here is your shoulders will go down. That's calming a bodily activity. It's hard to find the right English for this word, sankhara. So it could be habit, calming bodily habits, you could say. You'll find even printed rigidity in your body, which reflects your mind's patterns to look for predictability and control. So the egoic mind tries to gain control, and it pressurizes itself to gain control, and there's an echo in the body that reflects that. Then the body holds that pattern, the mind moves on to another activity, but the poor body carries this reflexive contracting. And then it contracts and gets numb. We come on here and we're thawing all those patterns. So you don't have to actively calm these so much as actually just breathe with them. And then see if you can invite the body to be relaxed. If you find that you are tensing, see if you can relax that tension by invitation. You offer the body to be relaxed. As the body relaxes, we come into the second tetrad here. The second tetrad is a little bit more on the mental activity side of the equation. So as the body relaxes, you get what's called subtle circulation. You have a heart that's pumping so hard it's going to force blood through all your tissues. It's incredibly powerful. But you have subtle circulation, and if your body is contracted, you don't have good subtle circulation. So that's why my hand will be red but cold when I'm in a contracted state. But as my body relaxes, my hands warm up. It's because there are all these little micro vesicles that are being contracted under body stress, and they relax. So all your body actually gets more oxygen, gets better circulation. But subjectively, what happens is that your body feels like it has more sensation in it. You're giving it more attention, but you're also able to feel more into your body. And that brings about these next two steps. As you experience your whole body and calm it, it opens up, it thaws, old patterns begin to break apart. And you can experience step 5, which is experiencing a Pali word called piti. And I've given it the translation as aliveness. Most people translate it as bliss, but it's not always pleasant. But it is the body being more active and not asleep. So you might feel this as a type of tingling in your hands first, or you feel tingling in your legs. You feel the circulation and subtle pulsing in your body. This is the expression of this word piti. It's as close to our tradition gets to chi and prana without actually going there, the way that other systems have gone there. So piti is a very energetic quality. P-I-T-I, piti. So you're invited to feel this, not just your coarse, obvious bodily sensations, but what is the subtle field of your body that's opening up as it relaxes. You can feel piti in your body. You can also begin to feel piti in your mind. And piti in the mind feels like you've just had a caffeine source. It becomes more dynamic, more delighted, brighter, more agile, more active, going from a sluggish state to an active state. People call that blissful, but it can get excessive. When it's excessive, it's not pleasant. I once I was teaching homeless kids for their GED. This one kid came in and he had 8 shots of espresso in one big cup. And he said, "We're going to learn a lot today." And I said, "I don't think we're going to learn very much today." He says, "No way, I got 8 shots and I'm just going to lock in." And he started drinking it, and there was a functional peak. And at some point he was just staring at the wall and he's like, "I cannot focus. Like, I think I need more coffee." I was like, "No, you've had too much PT in your system." You didn't know the word PT, but you can be too energized and it feels like restlessness. It feels like the mind is very windy and blowing around and you cannot get it to rest in one spot. A too energized state means that there's too much PT activated in your system. You actually want to find PT into some balance. As your mind balances, the PT tends to balance. As you balance in your body, the PT tends to balance in your body. If you're pushing hard in meditation, you can get a PT headache where you're trying too hard to fight the stream of what's happening, trying to be a good meditator and achieve something. So you start to fight your mind, which means that you're using force. And the PT ends up roughly reflecting your state of mind. So if your mind is assertive and aggressive, the PT will be assertive and aggressive. And so there are a lot of people who get meditation headaches from getting frustrated and just, you will not wander that tends to actually begin to have the PT lock up in places. When you get knots in your back, knots in your muscles, that corresponds to a part of your mind that's gotten locked up in your mind. It causes the PT to lock up in your body. Follow that part of your body, and you will have to, through a side door, follow that part of your mind. So anytime you relax your body, you end up relaxing your mind. So I'm kind of rushing through this whole energy body experience, but our language of that is called PT. It's the up activating energy. The second layer down, once you experience PT, if you invite that to relax, you experience something. There's this word, Pali word sukha, and it's somewhere between contentment and happiness. It's a happy contentedness. And the field of sukha, the subjective feeling of sukha, is sort of that moment that you get into a warm bath and you go, oh, that's it. Or you're on a rocking chair on a porch and you realize, somebody canceled an appointment and you're like, oh, I got this whole afternoon free. Oh, that's nice. So sukha it's not an energizing up, it's a relaxing, broadening, and opening. If you can balance sukha and PT, I give this image all the time and you all live in it. There are these glacial valleys. We don't have them in California so much. They're more like these V's, but you have these broad valleys. So sukha broadens the valley so that when the wind goes down, if you get a channeled valley, the wind is very forceful. If you get a sukha valley, the wind can kind of blow more gently. So then all the energy of PT tends to circulate in your body, and it does feel more blissful. But if your body is not relaxed and open, the energy will start to feel somewhat aggressive and restless in you. So you want to invite yourself to be relaxed. Invite yourself to be relaxed. But if you have too much sukha, you'll go into a very pleasant, unconscious state, which is fine. It's karmically neutral. It's okay to let yourself be in those. But if you can actually let the delight blend with the ease and find a place where those are not in contradiction, but it's the very relaxation that gives room for the delight of being alive. That type of blending is this experiencing PT, experiencing sukha. One question that comes up a lot is, do I have to do these in linear form? And you do not. It'd be impossible to only do this in linear form. So you're going to be, if you just breathe in and breathe out, these will actually be ripening on their own. So you don't actually have to even do this map. But if you're a tinkerer, you might want to actually consciously play with some of this, or at least notice that someone's mapped out the progression of how this works. Then we come to step 7 and 8. When you experience mental activity, and then you calm mental activity, and you go back and forth between these two. If you go right away to calming mental activity, it tends to be repressive. And you can only get so far as repressing mental activity. So you have to make room to experience mental activity. Every time you let go of a wandering thought, come back to the breath, you're not reinforcing mental activity. But sometimes you actually have to make room for the mind to have a fantasy, or the mind to have the memory. And you experience this as mental activity. This is a drama, a delight, a memory, a plan, an old argument. This is atomic physics, and I'm finally understanding it, or whatever your thing is. It's mental activity, so you experience it with perspective. This is mental activity. And I'm not going to repress it. I'm just going to let go of it as something I need to participate in. So often mental activity, if it has enchanted you, that enchantment keeps it rolling. And if you recognize I'm painting a lot of pictures in my mind, they're interesting, but I also could let them go. That attitude of just like, yeah, let's not push this swing, let's not increase the activity. Let's see if we can just relax out of the activity without making an enemy out of it. That tends to take the gas out, and mental activity tends to coast and slow down some. Actually hard to get this apparatus to slow down, but it definitely doesn't slow down if you try to repress it. That tends to cause all sorts of agitation. You're more likely to be able to experience mental activity and calm it if there is piti and sukha awakened in your body. Because piti and sukha, when they're balanced, are pleasant, you tend not to want to engage in your mental activity as much because the here and now is actually sweet. I learned this way too late into my Dharma practice, that contentment and ease with the present would be very helpful at getting my mind to calm down. I tried to subdue my mind, and I was attracted to teachers that use that language. You can subdue your mind. But I didn't relate to the present like it was a worthwhile place to be. It was a beautiful place to be, but I hadn't opened up that it was a pleasant place to be. So it's like trying to get the bone out of the dog's mouth, and it fights it. But if you give it something else, it'll let go of the bone. So when the present moment begins, when the flow of the present moment begins to be something that actually entices you, then when your mind wanders, you're like, why would I go up into this make-believe realm when the actual reality is so beautiful? I have all these supplements, and I'm trying a new strategy. Rather than like taking them out of their bottles one by one, I put them all in this one little dish. And I was just sort of like walking around preparing for this talk, and I looked at them, and the way the light was hitting them, and they're different colors. I was like, wow, I've never looked at these supplements. They're beautiful. Look at the green and the blue and the tan. And like, Temple, you're tripping out. It's like, oh yeah, I'm on a meditation retreat. The color of my supplements is actually, but I was like, yeah, let's move on to better stuff. I was like, what better stuff? That's the eye working. And the colors are beautiful. I've never stopped to look at the color of my supplements. They're actually really beautiful. I never stopped to taste my food. So you actually want to open that door, and as you open that door into flowing intimately with your sensory experience, you won't have to fight your mind wandering as much. The wandering will actually feel like fast food. It'll feel like just like, yeah, I don't actually want to go somewhere else. I just want to look at my supplements. Why would I wander into some fantasy when my supplements are right here? And the way the light's bouncing off them from this angle and that angle. Hopefully we're still on board. And so these first 8 steps really are the work of our practice, and learning how to have the right relationship to them, not trying to force them, trying to welcome them, watching them ripen. They'll ripen if you just know you're breathing in and know you're breathing out, so you actually don't have to get complicated in this. But experiencing the piti in your body and starting to know your body as a sanctuary to be home with them. Why would you want to be elsewhere? That's so beautiful. I have to give like an important caveat. As you increase intimacy, there is a cost to the intimacy that is worth paying, which is that reality has flavors of being pleasant, of being neutral, and of being unpleasant. The unpleasantness is temporary, but it also comes with the textures of experience. So I'm painting a very beautiful picture when we finally settle in, all of the sukha and happiness. A lot of people feel pains in your body. And sometimes they're old patterns, and sometimes it's actually new pain. There are unpleasant tastes. There are unpleasant emotions that we wish we could be distracted from. So that does take some courage. Lucky thing is they're as impermanent as anything. So they never actually move in and stay. But we have to we use group support to stay with the present when it gets a little complicated. And please have faith that it's just a temporary wave passing through. And it's worth the building of intimacy, because at some point you can actually take really big waves of reality, and it's all fascinating. As the heart gets freer, it actually can stay in intimacy and not be thrown by what's unpleasant. We'll talk more about that, but I just want to be honest about that. The third tetrad, and I'll do these next two more quickly because we'll talk about them later, but the third tetrad is basically about giving your whole heart, your whole life over to the breath, and not as a temporary thing to do so you can get back to your life, but you start actually doing something quite radical. And it ends up being temporary, but in the moment you say, I actually don't need any of these complicating thoughts. I'm having this devotional, wholehearted relationship to just breathing in and breathing out. We call this absorbing. So your mind begins to absorb into the breath. You can't force it to absorb, but you can welcome it at times to take full refuge in just breathing. And it ends up being a radical act, because in that moment, you're saying, I actually don't need anything else. You don't actually have to say that, but you're saying just breathing is fulfilling. Just breathing has what I need in it. And just breathing is worthy of my full attention. And the more that becomes true and you prove it to yourself, the more you're willing to give yourself over at times just to be an animal that's breathing. And that begins to open up a process we call absorption. And you'll have windows of that as the retreat goes by. And just to again briefly mention, the fourth tetrad is where we start to investigate the sides of reality where we're causing a lot of our pain and suffering. And so the first thing we do is we notice the impermanent nature of experience. As we get more intimate and comfortable with the impermanent nature, we can see that it's not worth all the passion and drama that we're getting caught up in for transient experiences. We have the right relationship to transient experiences. Again, we'll talk about more of this later. I call it impermanence, and then step 14 is the no drama mind. The no drama mind learns to let go even further. That's step 15, called cessation. We're very comfortable with endings. The endings clear the slate for new beginnings. And then 16, the mind that's very comfortable with endings and beginnings can't be caught. It's the mind that has agreed with fluidity. And once you agree with fluidity, your mind can't be caught in any net. And then the mind is free. The mind will feel free when it absorbs, because in that moment it's quite content. But the mind is actually free when it has full agreement with fluidity. That's what we call insight practice, or vipassana practice. It's agreeing with complete fluidity. So here are these 16 steps. The Buddha gave it to his students, and then let them work with it. You can work with this side of the sheet or this side of the sheet. There are times of the day where this feels intriguing. There are times of the day where this feels like it's complicating. There are times of the day where this will feel oppressive, which is why it has another side. And there are times of the day that this feels very soothing. Times of the day that this is not adequate. It's like, there's something more going on here. I'm more curious about this process. And just sort of saying, don't know, don't worry about it. It's not intriguing enough. And you flip it over, it's like, oh, wow, there's actually something here that's curious. There's actual words of the Buddha describing how this plant grows, mindfulness of breathing. And you'll go through cycles. And then later on in the day, it's like, I'm too sleepy. This is oppressive. That's soothing. So keep turning it over, and it's useful, and it's a dynamic map. Okay. So that's big picture. This is practical theory, hopefully. As we go through tonight and tomorrow, as much as you are inspired, give yourself more over to simple activities like hearing, or feeling your body, or being with your breath. It's the key that goes into your suffering and pops the lock. And all your other strategies, if they could have worked, they would have worked by now. But this is one that we actually haven't tried to its full depth. You got to get the key all the way in the lock, and then it turns. And mindfulness of breathing, feeling your body as it walks, tasting your food, starting to actually be present with just seeing without the story that seeing propels, but just the beauty of seeing. That's going to be the medicine for years to come. But over the next day, keep pointing yourself into that direction. And keep your attention. I hope it was useful. We have 20 minutes for walking meditation. We'll come in and we'll have a 20-minute sit. We're going to do a chant, an old Pali chant for loving kindness. It's 20 minutes sit. Hopefully that's intriguing, even for people who are not night owls. And then you can sit longer if you want, but we'll sit for 20 minutes as a group, including our chanting. So enjoy a little refreshing walk. Be immediate in your senses. Find the play of delight and contentment. And then we'll come back for one more set.